Well, hello, good to see you today. Thank you for joining me as we read together from Job chapter 13. Job chapter 13. And while you are turning in your Bible, getting ready to join me in that reading for today, let me take just a moment and apologize and update and kind of let you know what's been going on with these videos and these Bible reading studies. As you probably are aware, I did not do any videos last week. And for those of you who are members of the Taylor's Church family, you know why. But we have other people who are not members of our church and who are not aware of some of the things that have been going on. And they're probably wondering, why was there no Bible reading videos at all last week? So let me tell you and fill you in on that. We had somewhat of an outbreak, I guess, in our congregation of COVID. We had several people who went down with COVID, and I was among that group. So I had COVID last week, and then my wife got COVID last week. And so we had just a large handful of people. I'm not sure exactly how many it was, but at least a couple of dozen, I suspect, if not more, who were out sick, either with COVID or with something else. It just seemed like a lot of us in our group were sick last week. And then on top of that, we had a winter storm this past weekend. And so we had a lot of snow and ice, and life over the past 8, 9, 10 days has just been pretty crazy. And if you live in this area, then you know what I'm talking about. If you do not live in this area, at least you know now why there were no Bible reading videos last week. But I stayed on top of the Bible reading. I hope that you did too. One chapter a day. If you've already started to fall off the tracks and maybe kind of lose a little bit of interest or a little bit of steam here, to continue with the train metaphor, let's get refocused. Let's get back together as we read from Job chapter 13 today. Job chapter 13. Now, before we start reading, let me just summarize what we read last week. At this point in the book of Job, all three of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, those three friends who came to Job at the end of chapter 2, who saw his despair, who saw his struggle and his misery, who sat with him for 7 days in total silence and didn't say anything, who let Job speak first in chapter 3 and talk through some of the things that he was thinking and feeling. All three of those friends have now had an opportunity to speak. Each one of them has given their first speech, and there's more to come, but they have all three spoken, and Job has responded to each one of them in this first round of speeches. So as we come to chapter 13, we're on the tail end of those that first round of speeches where all three friends have spoken, and Job is giving his response to them. And the friends, as I said in an earlier study, the friends have said a lot of things that, generally speaking, are true. But when you apply them specifically to Job, they're not true at all. And you have probably picked up in the words of Job the frustration that he is feeling, because his friends keep hurling these accusations against him. Well, you must be guilty of sin. You must have turned away from God. You must have done something to incur God's anger, and you're deserving of these things that you're getting. And Job knows that's not the case. And so he is getting frustrated and exasperated with what his friends are saying about him and about his situation. But not only is Job getting frustrated with his friends, and he is starting to say things sharply to them in response, he's also saying some things to God and things about God where the exasperation and the exhaustion just comes out as he is directing his thoughts to God as well, not just his friends. And we see both of those in chapter 13. You see the exasperation, the frustration expressed at both his friends and at God in chapter 13. So look with me where Job, who has begun this most recent response in chapter 12, now it spills over into chapter 13, where Job says, look, my eyes have seen all this. My ears have heard and understood it. Everything you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you. He's talking to his friends here, and he is saying, look, I am the one who's living through all of this. And these things that you're saying, well, God only punishes those who are unjust and wicked. Job says, look, I understand the things that you're saying. You're not saying something about the human experience that I don't already know, all right? You're saying things that I've already thought about. You're saying things that I know to be generally true, but I'm telling you it doesn't apply to me. So continue on in verse 3. He says, yet I prefer to speak to the Almighty and argue my case before God. Here I am talking with you clowns, Job might say, who keep accusing me of wrongdoing, and you keep telling me things that I know do not apply to me. I want to talk to God. I want to take my complaints and my judgments and my thoughts directly to him instead of having to sit here with you windbags and try to make sense of all of this because you guys are not helping me. If only I could talk directly to God. Job is going to say something like that a lot throughout all of the dialogue that takes place in this book. Little does he know he's going to get his chance. And that comes at the end of the book. Verse 4, to his friends, you use lies like plaster. You are all worthless healers. All of these words that you have said, you're just trying to, you're trying to bring healing, but you're a worthless healer. You are not good doctors. The words that you're saying are not healing. And I like the imagery. He says, you use lies like plaster. I think the idea there is, we may not use the same expression, but we understand the idea that I think is being conveyed here. Let's say you've got a spot on your ceiling. The drywall in your ceiling is starting to take on some moisture. Maybe you've got a roof leak or something, and there's a little bit of water that's coming through your drywall, and you start to see a stain, kind of a mildew colored stain on the ceiling, and you say, oh man, that's terrible. That looks awful. That's really bad. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get some paint, and I'm going to paint over that. And that way I won't have to look at it. I won't have to see it. I'm going to plaster over it, to use the expression that Job uses here. I'm going to cover up the external, but I'm not actually going to deal with the problem itself. You see, there's a big problem with just painting over the mildew and pretending that the original source of the problem isn't there. And I think that's what Job is saying here. He said, you guys are saying things as if you can just cover up what's actually happening. You're not getting to the source of the problem. You're saying all of these things that appear to make sense, that appear to be expressions of wisdom, but what you're actually saying is wrong and it's not helpful to me at all. So in verse 5, he says, if only you would shut up and let that be your wisdom. Stop talking. Stop saying things because your words aren't helping. Hear now, verse 6, my argument, and listen to my defense. Would you testify unjustly on God's behalf or speak deceitfully for him? Would you show partiality to him or argue the case in his defense? Would it go well if he examined you? Could you deceive him as you would deceive a man? Surely he would rebuke you if you secretly showed partiality. Would God's majesty not terrify you? Would his dread not fall on you? Your memorable sayings are proverbs of ash. Your defenses are made of clay. if the tables were turned and you were the one under God's scrutiny and God was showing his judgments towards you, how would you turn out? And here you are trying to sit in the place of God and explain what God is doing to me. And there's nothing about your words that's true or righteous or just. What if the tables were turned? How would you fare if the things that you said to me were thusly applied from God to you? But I also like what Job says in verse 12, where he says, your defenses are made of clay. The things that you're saying, the arguments that you guys are making, it's all weak. And just like if you took a clay pot and you smashed it up against the wall or you threw it down on the ground, it would shatter into pieces because it's not strong. The things that you're saying are just like that clay pot. It's weak, it's worthless, it's futile. Nothing you're saying is helpful or true or right. So in verse 13, he says, be quiet and I will speak. Let whatever comes happen to me. I will put myself at risk and take my life in my own hands. Even if he kills me, I will hope in him. I will still defend my ways before him. Yes, this will result in my deliverance, for no godless person can appear before him. Now, what Job says there at the end of verse 16, no godless person can appear before God. That's true. And that's also what Job's friends have, in essence, been saying, that God is not going to condone wickedness or evil. Job agrees with that, as we've said before. They're speaking things that generally are true, and Job accepts that. He acknowledges that. But again, it just doesn't apply to his specific situation. Job is begging in these verses for an opportunity to present his case before God. It's not the first time he said this. He said this multiple times already, and he's going to say it again. And I love what he says in these verses here. He says, basically, I'm paraphrasing his words, but basically he says, if I had the opportunity to present my case before God, even if it cost me my life, even if I had to go to every expense and exhaust every resource that I possess, I would do it. And if it killed me in the end, it would be worth it so that I could speak and vindicate myself before God. Even if God kills me, I'm going to stick to this. I am going to hold fast to this integrity and this character that I have built for so long, and I am going to hold on to God and his integrity and his justice and his righteousness and prove that I'm not in the wrong here and that God is not doing this because I'm an evil person. In verse 18, now then I have prepared my case. I know that I am right. Can anyone indict me? If so, I will be silent and die. I am ready to give my case before God. I'm convinced that I am right. I've not done anything wrong or sinful. I am not a wicked person. I'm not unjust and so forth. And if someone out there can make a charge against me and prove that I am, then I'll sit here and keep my mouth shut and I'll even go to my grave. But nobody can do that. And now Job shifts the focus of his words from his friends to his God. Verse 20, only grant these two things to me, God, so that I will not have to hide from your presence. Remove your hand from me, and do not let your terror frighten me. Then call, and I will answer, or I will speak, and you can respond to me. Connect that to what he's just said to his friends when he said, I know that I'm right, I am ready to present my case, and now he turns that thought to God and he says, okay, God, speak to me. Talk to me, and let me present my case. I'll speak to you. Or let me do that, and then you speak to me. But God, we need to have a chat. We need to have a discussion here. Again, later in the book, he gets that opportunity. But remember what he says here. God, if you would speak to me, if you will call, verse 22, I will answer you. If you will call to me, I will answer you. later on in the book, God is going to call upon Job and say, okay, buddy, it's your time. Answer me. And Job won't have anything to say. He's going to sit there quietly, silently, and recognize he's made a big mistake. But we'll get to that later in the book. Now, verse 23, he wants God to lay out the things that he has done wrong. How many iniquities and sins have I committed? Reveal to me my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face and consider me your enemy? Will you frighten a wind-driven leaf? Will you chase after dry straw? For you record bitter accusations against me and make me inherit the iniquities of my youth. God, make a list of all the sins that I've done. Even go back to my youthful years and bring out those things. Bring out the charges against me. And in verse 27, he says, you, God, put my feet in the stocks and stand watch over all my paths, setting a limit for the soles of my feet. A person, speaking generally here, but he's talking about himself. A person wears out like something rotten, like a moth-eaten garment. God, bring the charges. You hear Job saying to God, I want to speak with you. I want to know why you're doing these things to me. And if I have sins that I'm guilty of, if there's wickedness in my life, show it to me. And as you read through this, I hope you can sense all of the emotions that Job is feeling. There is a frustration in his voice. There's an exasperation, as I've said already. But I also would imagine, at least, that there is some, maybe a balance, perhaps, between a boldness where Job says, yeah, I want to talk to God. I want to stand before God and present my case. But at the same time, there's also a timidity there. Well, maybe I'm not so sure I actually want to do that after all. I know who God is. He uses those expressions like, would you drive away a wind-driven leaf? I'm just like a leaf that gets tossed in the wind in comparison to God. See, I want to talk to him. There's this boldness, but there's also this timidity, perhaps, that Job is feeling, and all kinds of emotions that he's thinking and that he's feeling. And you can sense in all of this that Job is wrestling with, why is all of this happening? That's the question that he and his friends have been wrestling with for several chapters now. Why is all of this happening? Job is saying some things in these chapters about God that are said very candidly, very bluntly, but he's also saying things about God that are not true. He and his friends, it's not just Job, but they're all saying things about God that are not right. And it's because they're talking about things that are far above their level of understanding. I need to wrap this up, but I want to keep reminding you of this as we make our way through these dialogues. Job and his friends do not have the recorded text of the book of Job. That is unfolding as they are speaking. Their words are what we are reading, and particularly those first 2 chapters where the whole backstory is given. They don't know any of that. And so please don't forget that as you read through these chapters. Don't forget what's going on behind the spiritual scenes. Okay, we talk about things going on behind the scenes. There are things happening in the spiritual realm that Job and his friends don't know are going on. And it's easy for us to say, well, clearly this is what's happening. It's really not. They don't understand. They don't have what we have. But even though we have those first 2 chapters and we know what's happening behind the scenes, we still don't understand these things. We still wrestle with the same questions and the same difficulties that Job and his friends wrestled with so many thousand years ago. Stay with this. Keep going. I know this section is a little bit challenging, these discussions that they have. I know they use language that can be poetic and figurative and challenging in areas. Try to boil down each chapter to the essence of what they're saying and try to grab the simple ideas that they're trying to convey, and hopefully that'll help you as you make your way through. Thanks for reading with me today. God bless you.